It was a good thing, like, to be able to smoke weed with older people at parties. Checking behaviors that I would do with my OCD kind of became outweighed by the psychological effects of being so stoned out of my mind. That good things about weed started as good things for me and turned into bad things because of the way I abused weed. It's just as important to talk about the incentives and the reasons for smoking in the first place. Hey, what's up? My name is Julian. I'm about 3.5, I'm just gonna call it 3.5 months weed free, nicotine free. Yet I'm still using other drugs. But weed and nicotine, specifically weed, have been my problem drug. So that's kind of what this channel is about. Talking about my experience with quitting and relapsing and quitting again. Today, I want to talk about the benefits of smoking weed and kind of why I've smoked weed for so many years and why I've been so into it for so many years. I've focused a lot on this channel so far up to this point on the negatives, and there are a lot of negatives. I mean, it's why I kind of started making these videos, to sort of have something to look back on when I'm feeling like I want to smoke. But I feel that as it's important to talk about the drawbacks and the downsides, it's just as important to talk about the incentives and the reasons for smoking in the first place. Everyone has their own different reasons for starting smoking, but I think a couple of the reasons I've had over the years probably will resonate with a lot of people just because they're pretty common. Number one being anxiety and stress reduction. Now, whether weed habitually actually helps anxiety and stress is a whole separate topic. I'm not sure it actually does, but something I perceived for many years as a good thing about smoking weed was how it relieved my anxiety. Looking back on all those years that I've smoked weed to relieve anxiety, I now believe that it wasn't so much a medication or a fix as a distraction, really, from the anxiety I was feeling. Weed, in my experience, and a lot of people I've spoken with, provides this sense of calm. It's sort of an artificial sense of calm in that it's temporary and it's brought on. It's requested. It's not something that comes from you internally. It's something that you bring on yourself through an external source like weed. There was a period when I was having bad dreams and suicidal dreams and nightmares, and weed was always a safety net to fall into, to smoke at night and to fully just skip the dream process altogether. In quitting recently, I've found that I sleep, I feel so much more rested after sleeping. So there was definitely a trade-off, with smoking. Like, I didn't dream necessarily, but I didn't sleep or rest as deeply as I am now that I've stopped smoking. That was a big plus, and always has been a big plus for me, to free myself of the burden of dreaming, which oftentimes is reflections of things that are in the subconscious during the day that you don't have really like the resources or mental capacity to address in the waking state. And so your brain brings them up when you have no control over what you're thinking of, like when you're sleeping. And so if you are in a high stress situation, a high depression, high anxiety situation, it's really nice to be able to smoke weed and to skip over that kind of the brain's kind of natural processing and healing of the bad stuff that's going on in the night when you address those things in your dreams. Increased creativity. And this one's a weird one because I still struggle with how valid this is as a topic. When I first started using weed in moderation, before I was truly abusing it, I found great benefits in my creative areas, writing music, playing guitar, acting, memorizing monologues, reading Shakespeare, like all this shit that is specific to the person, but it really did seem to let me observe and engage with certain things in a whole nother way than when I was sober. And that was fantastic. I think there is something to be said about that. And unfortunately, because I couldn't handle weed in moderation and abused weed to such a certain extent after that, those benefits of creative, kind of this separation of your regular sober self to let you see creative things differently, that sort of got ruined by the frequency with which I started using weed. So that's all to say, like, I do think objectively there is this kind of magical perspective that a substance like weed can give you when it comes to creative pursuits. But personally, because of the way I've abused weed, it went from being this fresh outlook on things to just being this tired, ineffectual outlook. I'm not really sure how to better explain that. Mental health. This kind of goes back to what I was saying about anxiety and stuff, but I had undiagnosed OCD at the time that I was really heavily abusing weed, and that certainly was a way to self-medicate my obsessive behaviors and my compulsions and my routines and my checks. I wouldn't say it was necessarily like the right kind of treatment as a self-medication, but weed did kind of fuck me up so much in my brain that a lot of the compulsions and checking behaviors that I would do with my OCD kind of became outweighed by the psychological effects of being so stoned out of my mind that I could sort of defer to that rather than these other mental challenges of anxiety and depression and OCD that I was facing. I'm trying to think of an analogy. The first thing that comes to my mind is when you're like a kid at the doctor and they give you a shot and they like pinch you really hard on like the arm or something, and you don't really feel the shot. You just like kind of feel the pinch on your arm. That's sort of what weed has been to me over the years. Like, it's not taking away the pain or the difficulties of the shot, which is like the depression, the mental health, blah, blah, blah. It's just sort of covering it up, I think. I don't want to talk forever, so I think the last thing I'll touch on here, in terms of the good things of weed, was the social and recreational use. It helped me establish myself as someone who didn't care and was able to engage with drugs in a relaxing and cool way. To be carefree as a child, as a kid, as a high schooler, is to use drugs without really worrying about the implications of them. And it was extremely tempting for me and my peers to throw ourselves into this casual drug use. And that was a good thing. I mean, all of these things, it's so hard not to look at the other side of it and be like, oh, this is the bad parts of these things. This was a good thing, to be able to smoke weed with older people at parties and to not be afraid of it. To be able to build social capital with girls and with guys and with older people, and to build these life experiences of weed and drugs before my time, before maybe the normal kid should be exposed to these things. That was an absolute positive. It might have that negative side, and I think it does, but that was a really big positive side of weed and smoking. Looking back at a lot of these things that I just talked about, I think there's almost all of them can be viewed in such a positive and restorative and helpful light if it's done correctly, in moderation, used in moderation. All of these instances that I've just pointed out as kind of the good things about weed started as good things for me and turned into bad things because of the way I abused weed. So I still do believe these things are all possible. These are benefits from weed that are possible, but I don't, in a vacuum. I don't know if I could experience these specific positive things about weed because of my relationship with it now and where it's gone and how it's been and how it's developed. It's not something I have disdain for or judgment for. I may feel sometimes jealous and judgment of people that are smoking weed the way I used to, but I still can objectively look at a lot of the reasons that I used to smoke with a sort of appreciation for it. And part of my journey now and my clear path, my clear path project is to maybe find some of those benefits that I just listed without using weed. There's always more people kind of going through something that you're going through, more than you think. It's just about establishing that connection with those people and communicating with them. A really good resource is the Reddit r/leaves, that subreddit. Then you can connect to the Discord, and they have a twice a day hour or 2 hour message board thing, and there's so many wonderful people on there that talk about their experience with quitting weed and the good, the bad, the ugly, all that stuff. No matter what you're quitting or working or going through, there's magnificent support. All right, good night, y'all. Subscribe. Please subscribe. Please like and subscribe.